Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
I'm Indy Neidell.
And I'm Burns.
And this is the Baseball History Time Machine.
The best time of the week.
Yeah.
And today, I guess we're going to continue with what we began last week, right?
We are. Last week we talked about those hitters who, at the end of a season, had a career batting average higher than Ty Cobb's final career mark of .366. Well, last week we talked about the rookies because pretty much if you hit more than .366 your rookie season, your career mark is higher than .366.
Except for one notable exception.
Yes, except for him, and I will talk about him today.
So did we do all the rookies?
That we did.
So where are we going to start today?
Well, we're going to start by reminding people they can chat with us at either the Facebook page or our YouTube channel.
Do we remind them that we could also very much use their financial support to keep this going and to keep doing this full time?
We do. To be part of this adventure, you can go to patreon.com and find Indy Neidell's Baseball History Time Machine. Baseball History Time Machine. The $4 a month tier gets you early access to these episodes. And there will be other perks soon enough once we figure out what they are, and you might want to write in some suggestions too. Mm-hmm. Okay, back to the action.
Okay, who else ever had a higher batting average than Ty Cobb?
Well, first of all, there's Ty Cobb himself.
Wait, what?
Cobb ended his career in 1928,
Mm-hmm.
but in 5 of his last 6 seasons, he hit below his final career average of .366, and before that, he won all those batting titles, and he topped 400 3 times, so it was obviously higher for much of his career. I'll say again that when I was younger, Cobb's career average was listed as .367, but it's been revised to .366.
You did mention that. And what was Cobb's career high watermark?
His last batting title was 1919. And after that, George Sisler and Harry Heilmann replaced him as AL Bat King. But Cobb did have his third and final 400 season in 1922, hitting .401.
Yeah, but that was Sisler's crazy good year, right?
Well, one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Sisler hit .420 that year, yeah. But after that, at his absolute peak, he missed all of 1923 because of vision problems. And though he was great the rest of his career, he was never quite the same.
What was wrong with his eyes then?
The claim has always been that he had a sinus infection after getting the flu, and that did it, but perhaps there is more to it than that. I mean, there was no explanation for how a sinus infection caused vision problems, and we don't have his medical records. There is actually a Sabre article about it, which is quite interesting.
Sidetrack time?
Sidetrack time. An article in the Associated Press in April 1923 says that an eye doctor said Sisler's vision in each eye was normal. So it's not the retina or the optic nerve. But that leads to the possibility that it was eye coordination that was impaired. Sisler himself would later write that he experienced double vision, and one sports writer in October 1923 said that one of Sisler's eyes was noticeably crossed. So it might be a muscular issue.
Ooh, okay.
It was in April 1923 that Sisler was hospitalized for surgery for an inflamed sinus. Perhaps an infection spread into the eye orbit, or perhaps an infected mass compressed a cranial nerve or muscle. But in March 1924, he said his eyes were gradually working better together, and the angle at which he couldn't accurately see was small. He didn't think he could play great baseball, though. He played, of course, that year and through 1930, and while he had what most of the world would call excellent seasons, for a guy who averaged 400 the 3 years before the vision problems, only topping .340 once afterwards was not excellent to Sisler.
That's another thing of kind of what would have been, what could have been, you know.
Well, okay, he still made the Hall of Fame, but yeah, it is. Hey, here's something. That article, right? It said that Yankee pitcher Bob Shockey figured something out.
Okay.
That Sisler could only focus on the pitcher for so long, and then he'd have to look down or something, or look somewhere and refocus.
Okay.
So Shockey and company would just wait on the mound, there's no pitch clock, until he looked down and then pitch. And to quote the Sabre article, this suggests that Sisler at bat experienced short, intermittent periods of diplopia, which were likely brought on by the exertion placed on his weakened extraocular muscles during just a few seconds of gazing at the pitcher while awaiting a thrown ball.
I've seen something similar kind of in cricket, but yeah, that must have been incredibly frustrating to know how good you can hit, but you're not able to do it because of something that is not even related to hit mechanics.
Yeah.
It's eye related. And hey, considering we explained mastoiditis last time, nice one to work in some more medical stuff, kind of.
Thank you. George Sisler was the first major leaguer to appear on the cover of Time magazine, which he did just before the 1925 season began, and it said, "Will he, fans wonder, regain his former prowess?" He did hit .345 and drive in 105 runs in 1925, but he himself said those numbers, quote, "never gave me much satisfaction. That isn't what I call real good hitting."
Did he ever get his career average up to 366 before 1923?
No, just 361.
just 361.
Yeah, but back to Cobb, and some more medical stuff, actually. Something I bet you did not know about Ty Cobb.
Okay.
In the early 1920s, he was diagnosed with glaucoma, and this was before he hit .401 in 1922.
Wait. He hit 400 with glaucoma.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Only Ty Cobb.
He also had surgery to remove a growth from his optic nerve in March 1926, and he needed special glasses for a while after that.
Okay, and how did he hit then?
339, 357, and 323 at ages 39, 40, and 41.
Insane. Wow, so what was his highest career average then?
At the end of the 1922 season, Cobb's career average was 372, which was when Sisler's maxed out at 361.
So who are some of the other great hitters who managed to top 366? I'm assuming they're all great hitters, of course.
They very much are. I'm going to start with a fairly obscure one.
Okay.
Tuck Turner hit .323 as a rookie with the Phillies in 1893, but hit .418 and .386 in 1894 and 1895, giving him a .388 career average after each of those seasons.
388 career batting average after 3 seasons is insane. Who is this guy?
Tuck Turner was the Phillies' backup outfielder, and even hitting like that, he could not crack the starting trio of Hall of Famers Billy Hamilton, Ed Delahanty, and Sam Thompson, perhaps the best hitting outfield of all time, who formed the only all 400 hitting outfield in history in 1894.
So with Tuck Turner, they had 400 hitting outfielders, and he couldn't even crack the team.
You are correct. But when Thompson and then Delahanty were injured, he really took the chance to shine, though apparently he wasn't all that hot in the field. There is a brilliant article called The 400 Club that I want to cover one day that goes into all the micro stuff about the 400 seasons, so I'm not going to go into it too much now, but it claims that Turner's road batting average of .442...
Whoa, he hit .422 on the road?
.442 on
.442?
the road. Okay, now that 400 Club article points out that it is the highest road average a 400 hitter ever had during a 400 season. But Turner's Sabre bio takes that as highest road average anyone ever had in a season, and that is not true.
Wait, so someone hit .442 on the road and did not hit .400 that season.
Yeah, and that someone is Harry Heilman, who, get this, in 1925 hit .454 on the road, but only .326 at home, giving him a .393 average overall, his third batting title, and the single-season record for road batting average.
So did he often hit better on the road then?
No, and I don't know what was up with him in 1925. For his career, Heilman hit better at home, .347 to .336. And in 1921, when he won his first batting title, hitting .394, he hit .421 at home and .369 on the road, but had the same ballpark as he did in 1925. But back to Tuck Turner. He did set a couple of records in 1894. First of all, his .418 is the highest single-season average ever by a switch hitter, and it's also the highest batting average to not win the batting title.
Was it one of the other 400 hitting Philly outfielders who won it then?
No, Turner actually topped them all, but that was the year Hugh Duffy hit .440, the all-time record. The 4 Philly outfielders finished 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the batting race. Funny thing though, Big Ed Delahanty was keeping keeping pace with Duffy in the batting race at around 440 at the end of August, but he got hit in the chest with a pitch. And though he didn't leave the lineup, it weakened him to the point where he hit just 230 in September. But he had 2 other 400 seasons anyhow.
So how did the Phillies hit as a whole in 1894 then?
They hit 350, which used to be 349, but has been adjusted. But yes, that is the highest team batting average ever.
And how did they finish?
They finished 4th, 18 games behind Baltimore, who won by 3 games over the Giants.
Was this like the year 1930 where Philadelphia had all this incredible hitting and just no pitching at all?
In 1930, they finished last. In 1894, they had one top-notch starter, Brewery Jack Taylor, but they also relied on Gus Waying, who was a star before the pitching distance changed before 1893, but couldn't really handle the change, so that didn't go so well. Kid Carsey, well, he wasn't bad either, but Baltimore hit 343 as a team and had some top arms, and while the Giants only hit 301 as a team, they had pitching Triple Crown winner Amos Ruzzi and Jewett Meakin having his best year, so Philly wasn't going to beat either of those.
Okay, and what did you say Tuck Turner hit in 1895, the next season, basically?
He hit 386, but with less playing time. He was not about to crack the lineup. Now, Hamilton was dealt to Boston in one of the worst trades of all time, which we'll talk about when we do a worst trades episode, before 1896. But Turner was sent to St. Louis, who were no longer the powerhouse they'd been in the American Association in the 1880s. I wish I knew more specifics, but in 1896 through 1898, for whatever reason, Turner was not at all what he'd been in 1893 and 1894. And then he was out of the major leagues. I don't think anyone can sum up Tuck Turner better than Bill James, who wrote, Tuck Turner hit .416 and scored 91 runs in 80 games. He also drove in 82 runs. I can't remember that I ever read anything about him, and I have no idea what the story was. I think it's just going to remain a baseball mystery, you know. Turner played in the minors for nearly 10 more years, but that's really all I know.
I thought you said he hit .418, not .416 in 1894.
Okay, that is another one of those marks that's been adjusted as clearer records emerge.
Well, cheers to Tuck Turner.
Cheers, yeah.
Was there anyone else back in the 1890s?
Yes, there was, and I'll tell you right after this. There is one other guy from way back when who was a star for pretty much his whole career, who had nearly a decade of his career higher than Cobb's 366.
And who was this mystery man?
And this mystery man was Wee Willie Keeler. Starting in 1894 with those pennant-winning Baltimore Orioles I just mentioned, Keeler reeled off 8 straight 200-hit seasons.
Has anybody ever topped that?
Yeah. Ishiro Suzuki had 10 straight. Although his were in longer seasons, Seattle was playing 162-game schedules, and Baltimore was first playing around 130 games a year, which increased to around 140 at the end of his streak with Brooklyn, with a 2-year scheduled high of 152 games in 1898 and 1899, though with rainouts, games called because of darkness, and ties, well, not everyone played that full schedule.
Must have been pretty tough making schedules back then.
I imagine so. All traveling was done by train, so it took longer. So road trips from Western teams east and Eastern teams west tended to be pretty long affairs. It was not uncommon to spend a whole month of the summer at home, or a whole month on the road. At the extreme, the 1899 Cleveland Spiders played exactly 10 home games from July 1st to October 15th. That's 3.5 months. In fact, for the season, they played 42 home games and 112 games on the road.
Wait. Why on earth would they do that?
The 1899 Spiders are considered by many people to be the worst team of all time. It's a long story, and when we do an episode about worst teams, I'll cover why. But what's important to remember here is that teams split the gate receipts. That's how they earn their money then. And if you look at the Spiders' 1899 page on baseballreference.com, you'll see that of those 42 home games, many of them had only 125 or 100 paying people in attendance, and one had just 75 people in the crowd, whereas an August doubleheader with the Spiders in Chicago had 14,000 people attending. So other teams were either hesitant or flat out refused to go play in Cleveland because they'd lose money. That didn't help Cleveland, since their home winning percentage was .214, and on the road they were .090, less than 100, right?
Yeah.
The Rockies so far this year, by comparison, are 191. But back to Keeler.
Yeah, sure. Although I do like a good sidetrack.
I do too. Okay, after winning batting titles in 1897 and 1898 with 424 and 385 averages, Keeler's lifetime batting average stood at 385. In fact, already at the end of 1895, it was 367, and it would not drop below Cobb's 366 until after the 1903 season.
Wow, what did he finish his career with?
He ended up at 341, and his final 3 seasons were below 300. Now, he retired in 1910, but you got to remember, the second half of his career was played in the dead ball era. Like, in 1905, he hit 302. Easily the lowest average in his career at that point. But that was good enough for second in the league.
Just 302?
Yeah. Elmer Flick led the league at 308, the lowest AL leading batting average until Carl Yastrzemski's 301 in 1968.
Wow, that's a low offensive era.
It really is. From 1910, and I think first in that World Series, offense picked up noticeably with the introduction of the cork-centered baseball.
They used rubber before, right?
Yeah. The cork-centered baseball, though, could be hit faster and further, and this brings us to the next guy on the list, Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Who's just been reinstated, I guess you'd say, and now eligible for the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, Commissioner Manfred said that if you're deceased, you're no longer a threat to the integrity of the game, so you're no longer banned. So Joe Jackson, banned as one of the Black Sox who threw the 1919 World Series, though they were acquitted in court, though that was a sketchy procedure, well, he's now eligible for the Hall.
You think he'll make it?
It's hard to say what voters will do, but it seems to me that if you won't vote for a guy who took steroids to try to win better, like Bonds or Clemens, why would you vote for a guy who tanked the actual World Series on purpose for money? But, what do I know?
And how was his career in relation to Cobb's final mark?
Well, I touched briefly on it last time, but here's the story. He had 2 cups of coffee in 1908 and 1909, hitting 130 and 176. Thing is, that was with the A's, and the players were pretty nasty to an illiterate Southerner like Jackson. He was also really homesick, and Philly was 2 million people, so he was really unhappy. In 1910, he won the batting title at New Orleans in the minors, as he had at Savannah in 1909 and Greenville in 1908. But though Connie Mack liked him, he didn't think he'd ever work out in Philadelphia, and in July 1910 traded him to Cleveland.
I don't think there's anything that's worth that trade. What did the A's get?
They got outfielder Briss Lord and some cash. And to be fair, Lord was not bad for the A's. He'd been hitting just 218 before the trade, but hit 280 afterwards. He hit 310 in a full season in 1911 and came 14th in the MVP voting. And he really did help the A's on their way to World Series titles those years.
Hang on, are you trying to tell me that trading away Joe Jackson was a good deal?
No,
Okay.
I'm not.
I'm just joking.
No, I am not. I'm very much not. The human eyeball, which was Briss Lord's nickname, and no, I don't know why, though I really want to know why. The human eyeball may have done well in Philadelphia, but geez, what Joe Jackson did in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, there were a few Southerners on the team, and Cleveland was a smaller city. So Jackson actually managed to fit in all right there. In 20 games at the end of 1910, he hit 387.
But you said last time that doesn't make the higher than Cobb list.
It does not, because of those cups of coffee. His career average at that point was just 301. However, in his first full season, he hit a whopping 408, though like Tuck Turner, he did not win the batting title, but it did raise his career batting average to 391. And since he kept hitting over the years, though with declining averages, it remained above 366 until the end of the 1915 season.
Where did he finish up after 1920 when he was banned?
He finished up at 356. Funny enough, after 1913, he had only one single season that was higher than Cobb's career, and that was his swan song in 1920 when he hit 382. His kind of power average combo would have been perfect for the 1920s, and he was just 32 when he was banned, so that's another real what might have been.
Yeah.
But in 9 full seasons of baseball, he finished in the top 5 in the league in slugging all 9 times, in the top 7 in on-base percentage all 9 times, all 9 times in the top 5 in OPS plus, and his career OPS plus of 170 is 13th all time, and is actually ahead of Cobb's.
Really, ahead of Cobb's. Who are the great guys in baseball history with an OPS plus higher than Joe Jackson then?
They are, with 3,000 plate appearances minimum,
Okay.
Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Oscar Charleston, Barry Bonds, Lou Gehrig, Aaron Judge, Turkey Stearns, Rogers Hornsby, Mickey Mantle, Mule Suttles, Mike Trout, and Dan Bruthers, and that's it in Major League history.
That is some pretty fast company there.
Very much so. Hey, look, I'm going to move on with the list, okay? Okay, next on the list are two guys who had career averages higher than Cobb's, yeah, but they had them for exactly one and only one season each. And that season happens to be the same season.
Who are these gentlemen then?
These gentlemen not only did it the same season, but they played for the same team and indeed roamed the same outfield. We have mentioned them before in this series.
Okay.
When I talked about the hitting explosion of 1930 and those last place Phillies that we just mentioned today, who hit .315 as a team and still finished last, but were very much helped to that average by the outfield duo of Chuck Klein and Lefty O'Doul.
And who are we going to go over first?
I shall tell you after this. We'll talk about Chuck Klein first, I guess, because at the end of the season in 1930, in which he hit .386, he had a career average of .369.
He burst out of the gate like Shoeless Joe, didn't he?
He did. In 64 games in 1928, he hit .360. Then he hit .356 in a full season in 1929 and set the National League record for homers with 43, a mark which lasted 1 year. And then he hit that .386.
Tough to maintain that pace.
And he didn't. Although he did follow it up with .337, .348, and .368 the next 3 years, finishing number 2, number 1, and number 2 in the MVP voting. And that last season, he won the Triple Crown.
And he had the homer record for that year, right?
Yeah, but, you know, it's a little dodgy how that season finished.
How come?
Well, going into the last day of the 1929 season, Klein was tied with the Giants' Mel Ott, all of 20 years old, with 42 homers, which tied Rogers Hornsby's National League record. And guess what? The last day of the season was a doubleheader between Philadelphia and New York. So the stage is really set for drama, right?
Yeah.
This would be amazing, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Ott goes 1 for 3 with a walk in the first game, but Klein homers, so he's up 43 to 42. In game 2, Klein goes 0 for 5. But you know what Philly pitchers do?
I think I can guess at this point.
Yep, they walk Mel Ott 5 times so he couldn't catch Klein.
I hate stuff like that.
Me too, and it was a meaningless game standings-wise. However, while it was the last day of the year for Philadelphia, the Giants did have one more game left to play, but Ott did not connect. He would, however, go on to win 6 homer titles and retire with the then National League record of 511 homers.
Did they have an MVP award in 1929?
That they did, though it was technically unofficial. But here's some fun trivia. 1929 was the first season that former MVP winners were eligible to win a second one. I mean, in 1928, Babe Ruth hit 54 homers, and Lou Gehrig led the majors with 147 RBI. But Ruth had won in 23 and Gehrig in 27, so neither was allowed to win again, right? In
Strange
1928.
rule. Yeah.
Heck, when Ruth hit 17 homers in September 1927 to finish the season with the mind-blowing total of 60 homers, he was not eligible for the MVP award.
Is this relevant in 1929?
It is, because Rogers Hornsby, who set that homer mark with 42 in 1922, won a second National League MVP in 1929. He hit .380 with 39 homers, 149 RBIs, and 156 runs scored for the pennant-winning Cubs.
Go Cubs.
Yeah.
Where did Ott and Klein finish then?
Mel Ott finished 11th, and Chuck Klein finished 10th.
That doesn't sound right somehow. I mean, the human eyeball, whatever his name was, he didn't have a season like that and finished around there in the MVP race 20 years earlier.
Well, you're going to have to ask the voters in 1929 what they were thinking. But the guy who came a close second to Hornsby that year is the next guy on this list, Lefty O'Doul.
How did he do in 1929 and 1930?
He hit .398 and .383.
Yeah, okay. I can see how he'd be up there to win the MVP, and he'd be up there in the voting, actually.
But it was not until after the 1930 season that he had a 36620, 366 20th. That's right, we're going the tens, hundreds, thousands.
We have to break it down
We're going
like
to the
that.
100,000. 36620 career average to Cobb's 36617. And yes, if you're wondering, that is exactly one hit. over the threshold he needs to make this list.
So how is he not on the list after hitting 398, but was after hitting 383? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Because Lefty O'Doul had a few at-bats when he broke in as a pitcher with the Yankees.
Okay.
He came up in 1919, 1920, and 1922, and again with the Red Sox in 1923, but no joy.
Right.
In 77 innings over those years and exactly one start, he had a 1-1 record and a 4.87 ERA.
That's not so hot.
In 1919, he hurt his arm in a throwing contest, which you read about happening a lot in bios of older players. Okay, but in 1921, with San Francisco in the Pacific Coast League, he went 25-9 and hit 338 playing on some of his days up. So he was good,
Yeah,
for
good.
sure.
Yeah,
He had a good arm,
Yeah.
right? His major league pitching career ended July 7th, 1923, though, when he gave up 16 runs in 3 innings on 11 hits and 8 walks.
Yeah, that sounds kind of like the end, yeah?
However, only 3 of those runs were earned, which is small comfort. But still, 13 runs
nice.
were in 1 inning. And fun Lefty O'Doul trivium, no pitcher in baseball history has given up more runs in 3 innings. Jimmy Ring gave up 16 in 3.1 innings. That's 3 1/3 innings in 1922. But that's a third of an inning more than Lefty O'Doul. And I looked this up. Of the 23 pitchers in MLB history who have given up more than 16 runs in a game, all of them were complete games, except for one which was still 8 innings.
So the worst pitching performance in history?
Yeah. But it led to the mother of all comebacks. In 1924, after he gave up pitching, he hit 392 at Salt Lake City in the PCL. And this continued for a few years. And he won the first ever PCL MVP in 1927, hitting 378 with San Francisco.
I love guys that can just flat out, like just hit.
Finally in the big leagues again with the Giants in 1928. He hit 319 in 114 games. They traded him to Philadelphia after the season for Freddie Leach.
Is this another one of them human eyeball trades?
He had a name, Briss, which is short for Bristol. Bristol Lord. The human eyeball. Oh, fun thing about Briss Lord.
Yeah.
His middle name was Robotham. That's how it's spelled. And I don't know how he pronounced it, but I choose to believe it was Robot Ham.
Okay.
Robot Ham.
All right.
Bristol Robot Ham Lord. And his major league career was 10 years before the word robot was even a word, too.
How did robot become a word anyhow?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it comes
Go
from
ahead,
the play. It comes from the Czech play. It comes from the play Rossum's Universal Robots from 1920 by Karl Čapek, Czech, right? Technically, the robots in the play are androids, though, since they're made of artificial flesh and blood, and not just mechanical or electrical parts.
I've learned something. The things you learn on this podcast. I mean, the things you learn.
Okay, but this trade. It was another one of those trades. You're right. Freddie Leach had 3 solid years for the Giants, hitting 290, 327, and 309, but he was not Lefty O'Doul.
Must have been in his 30s when he made his comeback, right?
Yeah. He was 31 with the Giants in 1928, and he only managed 4 seasons with more than 400 at-bats before age began to tell. Okay. But he won 2 batting titles in those 4 seasons, and he has a 349 career batting average. After leaving the major leagues, he went back to San Francisco, where he is a god. Yeah. He managed the San Francisco Seals until 1951, and he played like 5 or 6 seasons with them part-time during that span. Okay, Lefty needs to have his story in another episode because there's a lot to unpack. He's in the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame, for one thing.
What?
Another day, my friend.
Okay, we're going to have to unpack that because that is something I'm very interested to hear. That sounds crazy.
And even I have been to Lefty O'Doul's, the restaurant bar he opened in San Francisco after finally leaving the game. He was a real ambassador for baseball. And hey, having the worst pitching appearance ever might be a record, right? Yeah. But he also did set the National League record for hits in a season in 1929 with 254. And though Bill Terry tied it in 1930, it's still the National League record today, and he is still a legend in San Francisco.
And here on the Time Machine.
And here as well.
But that gives me an idea for some episodes.
Yeah.
How many players are there that have played both Japan and both USA?
Don't worry, we've got plenty of them.
Or maybe some of the other leagues that are maybe in both Hall of Fame.
It's on the list. It's on the list.
Okay. You're ahead of me. Okay.
Back to the comments.
Yeah, of course. Is there any more later than like 1930?
Well, there are several Negro League stars who filled the bill. Okay. Josh Gibson from 1936 to the end of his career was higher, peaking at 384 in 1943 as a career average. Oscar Charleston did it almost his whole career, from his second season in 1921 until 1938.
Oh, wow.
And his last season was 1941, after which he was hitting 365, so he's close anyway.
That's pretty good.
Judd Wilson played in the Negro Leagues from 1923 to 1945 and managed this feat from 1926 through 1939. Mule Suttles managed it in 1927, 28, and 30. There may be several more from the Negro Leagues, but I'm not very good at their history yet.
Is that it then?
Sort of. There's the National Association, maybe. I said last time, if you consider everyone in the National League in 1876 a rookie, since it was its first season and it was the only major league, then Ross Barnes makes this list. But he played in the National Association 1871 to 1875, and he actually makes this list from 1871 for the rest of his career until 1881, his final season.
Okay.
There were also guys like Levi Meyerly, Cal McVeigh, and even Cap Anson who make this list based on National Association service.
So you don't count them?
I don't not count them, but I don't fully count them. The league quality was hit or miss. Teams folded and new ones popped up, and the schedule was a lot shorter. There are similar issues with the Negro Leagues. I do very much count them both as ways to introduce characters to go into sidetracks about, but we are running out of time for that today.
And are we done then?
No, we are not. Couple more things to run over.
All right, like what?
There are a few good also-rans who were fairly close in the National League and the American League that I will quickly list. Okay.
All right.
Jesse Burkett was hitting 359 after 1901. Nap Lajoie, 364 after 1902. Rogers Hornsby peaked at 363 after both 1925 and 1929.
Cubs hero.
Yeah, of course. Well, he had the 20th century batting average record for three teams. For the Cardinals in 1924, the Braves in 1928, and the Cubs in 1929. Three different teams.
Okay.
That's
Legend.
Paul Wainer was at 363 after 1928. Al Simmons was at 363 after 1931. Ted Williams, 356 from 1941 to the end of World War II. Wade Boggs was hitting 356 after 1988. Of course, none of those guys managed to keep it at those levels.
Hey, where did Tony Gwynn max out?
Gwynn maxed out at 340 after the 1997 season.
All right, anything else for today?
Yeah, one more thing.
All right, here we go,
Wait,
here we go.
there is one more thing.
Master Wayne.
Since 1930 featured both last time and this time, here is the list of the all-time top career batting averages for those who had careers in the NL or AL as they stood at the end of the 1930 season. Okay? George Watkins, 373. Chuck Klein, 369. Lefty O'Doul, 36620. Ty Cobb, 36617. Rogers Hornsby, 362. Al Simmons, 360. Paul Wainer, 359.
Ty Cobb's only fourth on that list. That's pretty incredible.
Well, I guess everything is relative.
But it was fun. I like it when you sort of do an exercise with statistics like this.
It's fun to sort of figure that out in the evening with a few drinks like I did with that. And it's always eye-opening. Okay, that is it for today.
But we'll be back next week.
We sure will. So take us home.
Goodbye for now from me, Burns.
And me, Indy Neidell.
And the Baseball History Time Machine.
Yeah.